Hey Fred, are you excited for Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated?
So the game I pushed for in the past decade is finally here. Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, published by THQ Nordic and developed by Purple Lamp Studios. Yeah, Heavy Iron wasn't involved with the project, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing. Instead of a standard remaster with upscaled PS2 textures or a basic emulated port on PS4, it's a full multi-platform HD remake with multiplayer and cut content. It's like what we wanted back in 2015, just better. While it may seem convenient for some people to think I'm the reason Rehydrated exists, I don't want to take more credit than I deserve. I'm not the only influence that led to THQ Nordic to produce this Battle for Bikini Bottom remake. From what I understand, it was primarily the speedrunning community as well as the many fans on social media that actually inspired them directly. But despite all of that, I still had an influence on the community itself. I was one of the first people that built an audience on this stuff. Remember when I failed to get that Sponge Out of Water game? Remember how I called out Activision for treating SpongeBob like dirt and they allowed their license to expire? Remember when I started a campaign for a Battle for Bikini Bottom HD remake or sequel before most people even cared? Remember when I used to make updates and reviews before everyone else started doing it? Yeah, all of that stuff did leave an impact. But of course, that was only the beginning. They mainly noticed the influx of fans asking for a remake, which didn't start happening until I made videos about it. So think of it as a domino effect. And while I was one of the first people to help create awareness online for the game, the speedrunning community is now much larger in scale than anything I've ever done in the past. I guess promoting petitions just wasn't good enough for them. I'm still grateful for this. There weren't a lot of people doing what I was doing back then, and I really wanted to help make SpongeBob games cooler and fun to talk about. I didn't like how people were comfortable talking about popular Nintendo games, yet for some reason talking about a SpongeBob game wasn't okay. My goal was to go against that mentality. Anyway, I like to give Shift some credit, since he's been a big influence on Rehydrated's development. In fact, I heard he was pretty fast. From what I understand, Shift had the opportunity to run Battle for Bikini Bottom at a speedrunning event, despite the game being rejected for being a stupid SpongeBob game multiple times. I heard about him following his passion despite having to deal with people bitching at him for running a SpongeBob game. I respect Shift for standing up for what he believes in and not giving in to the pressure to abandon his dedication to Battle for Bikini Bottom. His work in the speedrunning community gave the game more exposure, and you can even see his name being mentioned on several media outlets. He's a star, man. There's a good chance that without Shift, Rehydrated would just be a pipe dream and we'd probably receive nothing better than a shitty port, if anything at all. There's a lot more to Shift than that, but since I'm not a part of the speedrunning community, I think you're better off just watching him to find out more. After all, he has a documentary. I'll link him in the description of this video. I also want to thank Riders DX for keeping the community updated on Rehydrated. The Rehydrated Relief Charity event has been a lot of fun and I appreciate his support. Go check him out. Anyways, Rehydrated is a huge deal for all of us. After all these years, we finally have it. I know the timing of this video is odd, but I wanted to say something before I boot this game up for the first time. I want to talk about what's been on my mind before I play it. THQ Nordic said on Twitter that the trailers aren't the final build, but at the same time they are close to the final build. You can interpret that however you like. I also did not have the opportunity to play this game at PAX East, and I also did not watch any community-made Rehydrated content on YouTube. This video will be purely based on observation of official material released by THQ Nordic and Purple Lamp. With that being said, feel free to speak up if you know something that I don't. Keep in mind that my opinions are subject to change once I actually play the game. Now, enough rambling, let's get to it.
Yeah, all that stuff is cool, Fred, but are you excited for Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated?
Initially, when Rehydrated was announced last year, we just had an animated teaser and screenshots. The teaser was actually the only trailer we've had for a while until recently. The teaser served its purpose and I don't have a lot of complaints about it. During Gamescom 2019, Purple Lamp Studios showed off the game in its pre-alpha phase. THQ Nordic and Purple Lamp certainly had a lot to say about it.
Nice. Have you thought about this kind of feedback before, that they would like run into your doors like that?
I know I was a fan of the game back for the original PlayStation 2, and I enjoyed it back then. And we've been hearing from THQ that there was some interest, and so we knew that there were fans of the game. But to see the reaction really has been unexpected. Just how strong the reaction has been. It's been extremely exciting.
Which is cool, right?
Oh,
It's awesome. Like basically, ever since we publicly announced that we as THQ Nordic, as the publisher, have the right to do another SpongeBob game, every message we ever send out anywhere on Facebook, Twitter, wherever, among the first answers was always, so what about SpongeBob? What are you doing with SpongeBob? What about Battle for Bikini Bottom, SpongeBob?
There were some things they said in their stream I was happy to hear. I was happy to hear Purple Lamp talk about how they were aiming for the game to be 60 FPS across all platforms, how they want to appeal to both kids and adults, how they're adding little details that weren't in the original, how they're aiming to maintain some of the original game's challenge, and how THQ Nordic apparently aimed to give Purple Lamp a decent amount of development time to work on the game, while treating their workers well by not forcing them to work on holidays and such. This all sounded great on paper, but is this game really going to maintain a good challenge?
So it's this idea of taking the game and not changing it mechanically and making sure that it still feels like the game, because we're big fans of that and we love the original, while slightly modernizing it. And that's primarily things like these visuals. Memory cards aren't a thing anymore, so save points, are
So it's not exactly Dark Souls with a yellow sponge, but it's also not an easy game.
We want to maintain an element of that difficulty too, because that is part of what made it fun, was that there was some real challenge there, and I think if we were to pull that out entirely, it would be a different game at that point, and that's not what we want to do. We throw in the term a lot, faithful remake of the game, because everything is new. All the levels are actually completely redone, all the models are redone. It's a 100% new creation, but we're doing it like side by side with the original to make sure that it's a one-to-one conversion of it, and being very respectful of a game which we really liked, and just making the version that kind of we want to be playing.
I get what they're saying. They want to improve the game design by making it more practical for kids, but they still want to leave a fair amount of challenge in. That's a good thing, but execution matters more than concept. I hope they don't add too many shinies in the game, as that would make progression much easier than it needs to be. I know the paywalls can get annoying, but it gives the player a reason to actually collect the shiny objects in the first place. Otherwise, you'd just be running around getting the main collectible with no real incentive. It's very important that the remake still respects the intelligence of its players, and that means they shouldn't make the more challenging bits of the game too easy. For example, I really hope Purple Lamp didn't add underwear pickups in the second phase of the final boss. It's fine to keep it in the first phase when you're just starting off, but what's cool about the second phase of the fight is the emotional pressure to complete the rest of the stage without dying. It's really well designed, and handholding would pretty much ruin these cool set pieces. It's also worth noting that the original game makes each big robot boss fight gradually tougher than the previous. It tests the player's skill with the ability they unlocked in the previous hub area. The final boss tests your skill with the cruise bubble in the first phase of the fight, but then it also tests your skill with all of your abilities at once during the second phase of the fight, with no underwear pickups. That makes the boss fight a lot more intense and immersive. They can still add more shinies in certain areas throughout the game. After all, the boosting for shiny objects was a bit annoying in the original. It's fine as long as it's not excessive. I just hope they don't ruin the gradual difficulty that was in the original. Purple Lamp should allow newcomers to face a challenge and earn their way through the game just like we did.
Yeah, definitely. Like, obviously it's a cult classic, so we don't, completely redo anything in a very different way. It's really about the small details that basically just help you play the game in a modern way, but still have the feeling that you had when you played it back then. The original was a tough game. It was a hard game. There's no doubt about it. With some steep difficulty spikes in Kelp Forest and stuff like this. So these are the things that we're looking at.
Anyways, we'll discuss more recent footage now. One of my biggest concerns has been the animations. I don't know if it's just me, but the Bubble Bash and Double Jump animations seem kinda off. It looks better in the newer footage, but still different from the original. The jumps just don't seem as natural in my opinion. One of the worst animations is definitely the recreation of the Golden Spatula animation. This one is painful for me to watch. The animations for collecting golden spatulas in the original game were so iconic, but here it looks rushed and uninspired. You can give them a pass for it looking bad in a pre-alpha build, but even in newer footage it still doesn't look good. When you compare Rehydrated to the original game, despite the limited hardware and outdated engine, the animations are far more expressive and natural in the original game. This is similar to what happened to the cutscenes in Ratchet & Clank 2016, but not as bad. But it does contrast the more expressive Crash and Spyro remakes. Look at G-Love's death animation here. He just crumbles. In the original, his death animation would vary based on how you killed him, whether it be from melee or from a distance. While lassoing in midair is an improvement for Sandy's gameplay, it still looks like they only gave G-Love one death animation, and that sucks. Another example of this is when you bubble bash Monsoon, he just dies and there's no proper death animation to go with it. Remember when he would just fall to the ground? I mean, why remove these animations? If this is prominent in the final product, I don't think destroying robots will be anywhere near as satisfying as we remember. These animations are very basic and I don't see why they wouldn't include them. Sandy's swinging looks awful too. It looks weird and unnatural. In this remake, a lot of animations look bad because the movement tends to either be too fast or too slow. It doesn't feel natural from what I can tell. It's also very noticeable when they're missing frames. It just has no flow to it and it looks very unpolished. The original game's animations just work and you can see heart and care was put into the little details. That robot SpongeBob fight, oh my god, it looks trash in this remake. SpongeBob's karate chop animation here looks so bad. The lack of frames is distracting and I don't see how anyone would find this acceptable. This was the best boss fight in the original game and now it's been reduced to something unpolished. The animations for Robot Patrick don't look much better either. Just look at how slow the spin looks. Maybe they made the boss easier despite it taking place later in the game. Looking at these targets, that seems to be the case. I mean, I don't know yet, but I can only imagine how much that could ruin the darker atmosphere of the boss. And it's a nice touch giving realistic fish head a headset, but the robot Sandy model looks like crap and she doesn't even have a real-time shadow, even though she does in the original game. The Poseidon stage also has less detail in the background than the original. Gone are the signs the crowd will hone up and there's also no logo at the bottom. Heavy Iron's attention to detail is gone and now the stage just looks bland. Let's look at the SpongeBob mechanics. It looks okay on normal ground, but seeing SpongeBob just teleport here looks off. It looks like they ruined the flow of these sections and made them too easy. I really hope that isn't the case. Sandy's double jump animation while sliding also no longer has her board, so it looks different. I thought it looked cool in the original and them removing it kinda rubs me the wrong way. And once again with Sandy, we have yet another golden spatula animation that looks like it's missing frames. These things may seem small to the average person, but I feel like a lot of the little details matter when you're remaking a game. And the more you ignore these details, the more you butcher the remake. I know Purple Lamp is a small studio and all, but Heavy Iron was also a small studio, and they had a lot less resources to work with, and we're talking 2 generations ago. I won't accept a system with 32 megabytes of RAM having more expressive animations than any of today's consoles. I know it's challenging to recreate these animations on a new engine and make them feel faithful, but look, I get it. It's not going to be exactly the same. I'm not expecting that. It's just some of them are missing frames or just don't look right. I'm not seeing the one-to-one conversion Purple Lamp was talking about. But to give credit where credit is due, I'm glad they added some new animations to try and make the game feel more alive than the original. The new animation after you hit King Jellyfish was a good addition, since in the original he just makes noises and doesn't react normally to getting hit. It's a shame additions like this are contracted by the game, looking like it lacks any soul.
Oh, please. I have no soul.
I hope those cute little dancing animations the robots would do at times when you die, get hit, and shit are still there. It's charming and it makes the game feel more alive. I know some of my complaints sound nitpicky, but I'm trying to be constructive by suggesting improvements while still mentioning what Purple Lamp is doing right. On the bright side, THQ Nordic recently released a trailer showing some of the cutscene of the final boss. The animations here look a lot more expressive here, so hopefully the animations will be fixed in the final build. Everything I've been seeing up to this point looked bad. As for the multiplayer, I think it looks interesting, but as of right now I don't have much to say about it. It's a great idea for SpongeBob to have an online mode again for the first time in years. It adds more to the game since the original game didn't have any of this stuff. But you know what the original game also didn't have? Costumes. I love the added costumes in some of the old SpongeBob games. The movie game, Creature from the Krusty Krab, and Truth or Square all have these great costumes you could wear. I kid you not, one reason I play the movie game more than Battle for Bikini Bottom is because of the costumes. I can run around in the Mermaid Man outfit and have different animations for both when I'm idle and running. I can also slap on the Rip Pants outfit and watch SpongeBob shake his yellow ass while idle. Even if you don't use costumes in a movie game, there are sometimes different outfits for the characters depending on what level you're playing. While I get this game is different, there's just a lot of variety in that game in comparison. In Battle for Bikini Bottom, all the characters have the same outfit throughout the entire game, and to me that makes it a more bland in comparison. It's not that it makes the game bad, there's just no customization. I'm sure kids would love dressing up the characters to their liking. It wouldn't be a bad idea to add it to Rehydrated. I know costumes aren't the biggest deal in the world, but they do nothing but add to an already great game.
Answer the fucking question, Fred. Are you excited for Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated?
Anyway, let's talk about the actual visuals, especially since Rehydrated looks a bit odd.
The PS2 product, those were great games, and the graphics were a bit simpler. So I think you used your imagination a lot to add the details yourself, because you also looked at that robot, you saw its personality, and then your brain made it, filled in the gaps.
Yes.
And now we tried to fill in the gaps kind of the same way that you did. And of course, a big help here is that we have the support from Nickelodeon, who obviously know the series better than anybody else, and can give us hints and pointers and say like, okay, these kind of objects, these kind of colors, these kind of things are what define SpongeBob, what make a SpongeBob thing look SpongeBobby.
Let's look at the character models. The character models in Rehydrated are an upgrade from what we've had in the past decade, but they aren't much to look at. SpongeBob looked like a soulless block of cheese when they first showed off gameplay, but now I guess he looks okay in newer footage. Maybe. Some of his animations seem to be out of place though.
Oh my gosh, you're bald!
They definitely made him a brighter yellow, probably because that's how he's colored in the show now. Well, I guess it makes it authentic to post-sequel SpongeBob, so I'm guessing this was recommended by Nickelodeon. Let's look at Sandy. Sandy's face in this screenshot looks like a textured balloon. In fact, her mouth clearly has visible edges. In the gameplay, however, Sandy looks decent, and it's good to see that she finally has a 3D helmet again. I can't believe I just said that. Well, her model looking good in this cutscene is a good sign at least. Mermaid Man, on the other hand, looks like a McDonald's toy. Maybe something out of a Happy Meal. I think we can all agree that out of the characters we've seen, he looks the worst. Like, bro, is this a video game character model or an action figure? He looks like a chew toy for a dog, and that's just embarrassing. Patrick looks okay, I guess. I mean, he looks like Patrick, so he's fine. I really don't have that much of an issue with how Squidward, Gary, or how many of the other models look. I just think that the art style itself isn't that great. I'm not sure on how I feel about the standard robots. They're technically more detailed than the simple look they had in the original, but I'll have to play this for a while and see if their new look grows on me. Right now, I'm not that impressed. The giant robot boss models, however, all look mediocre. They all have really bad shading, and the texture work in the original game looked a lot more SpongeBob-y than this. The Heavy Iron games always look more like the show than the other SpongeBob games, and I feel like Rehydrated falls behind in this regard. I know the art style in the original wasn't perfect, but at least Heavy Iron had a sense of style. I understand that recreating two-dimensional characters like SpongeBob in 3D isn't an easy job, especially when you're recreating an old 3D SpongeBob game from the early 2000s on top of that. On the bright side, the civilian character models look fantastic and their designs are very faithful to the original. The models aren't that big of an issue for this game, the art style is just pretty meh in my opinion. I like how the game goes for a cartoony look and everything, but it just doesn't look very polished. The colors may be bright and vibrant, but it's hard for me to like it when it looks so awkward. Look, I'm not the best at describing colors and shit, but the colors are too bright and saturated. Sandy's Dream is a perfect example of the game being too bright. Brighter doesn't mean better. Look at the colors on Sandy's Sky Slide stage. Just look at it. It'll take a lot to convince me that this looks good. It looks awful. Yeah, okay, Kelp Forest had bad lighting in the original game, so making Kelp Forest brighter technically makes it better, but that doesn't excuse the other levels. Goo Lagoon is also a good example of the game being too bright. The ground in Goo Lagoon looks a lot more like snow in this cutscene than sand. None of this impresses me. When you compare Rehydrated to older remakes on the same hardware like Insane Trilogy or Spiral Reignited, it just doesn't hold a candle. The game looks weird. A lot of fans think it looks beautiful, but it just looks off to me. It's hard to explain. Even if the final game somehow looks a lot better, I don't think it's good to market the game's levels before they actually look good. This is a remake after all. I think Truth or Square has a much better art style, and that game is 11 years old. It's colorful, cartoony, and full of life everywhere you go. The vibrant colors aren't excessive, and the brightness was never shoved in your face. It has great shading, and that classic water effect in the Heavy Iron games reminds you that you're underwater. I just love SpongeBob's model in that game. He's so expressive and has so many different animations. I know Truth or Square has nothing to do with Rehydrated, but it's a great example on how to make a SpongeBob game look good visually. It makes me wonder why Heavy Iron isn't working on the remake. I would also argue that Surf and Skate Road Trip from 2011 looks cooler visually, and that was just a stylized Kinect game. The levels, however, still generally look okay, and the backgrounds don't look that bad. I've seen much worse over the years, and Rehydrated still looks somewhat faithful to the original game. I can tell that they're trying, it just seems like they could do better. And for some reason the NPC models were made super tiny everywhere. Am I the only one that noticed this? I mean, look at this. Why are they so tiny? The original game wasn't the best looking PS2 game, but it had a charming look and feel to it. The remake doesn't look that spectacular, and I'm not sure if it'll look much better when I play it in person. It does have a higher resolution than the original game, but that's just the bare minimum of what can be accomplished here. While the game does look better than games like Nickelodeon Kart Racers, it still looks unimpressive. Yes, nobody buys a SpongeBob game for its graphics, but that doesn't mean mediocrity is okay. When rush games like Legend of Korra exist, you don't need a huge budget to make a cartoon licensed game look good. Especially when the original game you're remaking had a low budget to begin with, but still looked good for its time. Rehydrated exists to preserve the legacy of the game for future generations. Who knows if Rehydrated will stand the test of time with its new look. I know those animations won't. While the visuals aren't the most important part about the game, I think it holds Rehydrated back. Now that we're done talking about visuals, I want to talk about Battle for Bikini Bottom's memorable soundtrack and what they're doing with the voice acting. The soundtrack of Rehydrated is completely recycled from the original game. Purple Lamp made this decision with Destroy All Humans as well. They did this to maintain the feel of the original game and not ruin the music like, let's say, Ratchet & Clank 2016. They took a cautious approach and decided to play things safe to not upset fans of the original game. While Purple Lamp made this decision in good heart, this choice is a bit flawed. Let me explain. While the original game's soundtrack is classic, and I would hate to see them potentially ruin it with new music, the problem is that the old soundtrack was designed around the atmosphere of the original game. The remake has a completely different art style and atmosphere from the original. That means the old music may not fit the remake, which can break the game's immersion. So how can you solve this problem without creating new music, you might ask? Easy. Look at what Crash and Spyro did. They took the original soundtrack and they remixed it to fit the atmosphere of the remakes. Yes, some fans are gonna prefer the original music over the remixes. It's not Purple Lamp's responsibility to remove someone's attachment to the original game. It's their responsibility to show respect to the original while still putting in the effort to improve upon it. Hell, they could have also fixed that problem by adding a feature that allows players to switch between the old music and the remix music. Boom, problem solved. If Purple Lamp remixed the soundtrack, they will be adapting the original music to the remake instead of just pasting the old tracks over to the new game. While at the same time, they also won't be shitting on the original soundtrack by bringing in new music. This in essence updates the game while still keeping everything the same. That would have been perfect. It would have really made you feel like you're playing a better version of what you played as a kid, instead of an HD remake with PS2 audio ported over. The safe approach they took here feels very lazy, and I worry that certain tracks won't fit. I also heard that the tracks will be in mono instead of stereo, and they added some type of effects to try and make it feel like stereo, but it's not stereo. If that's the case, I think that fucking sucks. Correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't the recycled tracks in Truth or Square in stereo? I mean, I'm not sure. I'm sure the music won't be as annoying as how Heavy Iron handled the music in Truth or Square, but I'm not too happy with the The voice acting in Rehydrated took a similar approach. They took the dialogue from the original game and just pasted it over to the remake. It's not a bad idea on its own to preserve the original lines, except the way this was handled is flawed as well. They missed out on an opportunity to improve the game further. One thing they could have done was analyze the delivery of each line and re-record lines when necessary, but I'm sure they wouldn't bother with that. Here's another thing. We all know that Clancy Brown didn't return after Revenge of the Flying Dutchman to voice Mr. Krabs in Battle for Bikini Bottom, and Mr. Krabs was replaced with Joe White, who also replaced Mermaid Man's voice actor. Of course, since all the dialogue audio is recycled, no one bothered to hire Clancy Brown to actually voice Mr. Krabs in this remake. Unfortunately, they just reused Joe White's lines for both Mr. Krabs and Mermaid Man. They really missed out on an opportunity to fix this problem. I guess this is what they meant by saying they wanted to be faithful to the original, right? I don't like it. So Clancy Brown can voice Mr. Krabs in those terrible Activision games, but he can't re-record Mr. Krabs' lines and rehydrate it so it'll be more consistent to the show? I would understand if they actually made the effort to reach out to Clancy Brown to re-record the lines, but I'm pretty sure they planned on just recycling the old lines from the get-go. This is bullshit. Whoever made this decision, it sucks. I have nothing against Joe White as a person, but his Mr. Krabs impression is just awful.
For heaven's sake, boy, cover your ears.
Do you know how embarrassing it is to still have this be Mr. Krabs' voice? And now the new generation has to suffer too? Mermaid Man, on the other hand, is in a different situation. His original voice actor passed away in 2012, so we couldn't get the original Mermaid Man to replace Joe White even if they wanted to. The thing is, Ernest didn't show up in Lights Camera Pants or Creature from the Krusty Krab to voice Mermaid Man either, but they didn't use Joe White to replace his voice actor. They used Joe Alasky, and his Mermaid Man voice is arguably much easier on the ears.
Sure do love it.
They could have had Clancy Brown re-record Mr. Krabs' lines to finally fix a problem that's always plagued Battle for Bikini Bottom. At least that would have been a step in the right direction to improve some of the missing voice cast. While I do appreciate how Purple Lamp improved the lip syncing during dialogue, I really wish they put more effort into the voice acting.
So, does that mean you're excited for Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated?
I know this video is overall negative, but Rehydrated probably won't be a horrible game. And I understand why everyone is excited for it. SpongeBob is being treated much better than he's been in the past decade, and a lot of people are content that we are even getting this remake in the first place. Rehydrated is only $30, and that's a much better deal than Plankton's Robotic Revenge was back in 2013. It's better than licensed games that other publishers release at a starting price of $50 or $60, especially when there probably isn't enough content to justify the price. While the standard edition is at a fair price, SpongeBob also received more expensive special editions like the Shiny Edition and Fun Edition, something I don't remember a SpongeBob game ever getting. I appreciate the extra effort, and it's awesome to see SpongeBob getting special editions now, but those prices though. The Shiny Edition is $150 and it comes with a SpongeBob figurine, a golden spatula, some wall stickers, SpongeBob's tennis socks, and 6 lithographs. The Fun Edition is $300 and it includes a SpongeBob figurine along with a Sandy and Patrick figurine. Sandy's got her lasso while Patrick is holding a throw fruit. You also get Tiki keyrings along with the other items available in the Shiny Edition. I'm not gonna lie, those Tiki keyrings do look kinda fire, but is it really worth $300? I don't know about that. That seems very overpriced for what you're getting and not really practical for most people. If you're not that much of a fanboy, you're better off buying a console instead with that money. Imagine if they released a special edition PS4 Slim or Switch for Rehydrated. I think that'd be a great way to get people's attention, especially from the younger demographic. I mean, unless if you just got it like that or you have a rehydrated boner the size of Texas, I don't think most people should even bother with the special editions. While I'm on the fence about Rehydrated, I will still play it for myself. Besides, why would I ask for the game for years just to not play it? That's dumb. It's also ideal to support the game so we can have more SpongeBob games in the future. I'm not saying the game will be bad, it might actually play well. On paper the game sounds great, but from what I'm seeing, I'm not that excited. I'll have a final opinion once I play the game. After dealing with the darker days of the community, I do want to show appreciation and gratitude for the fact that my wish came true. And I want to thank everyone who joined me on this journey. I don't want to come across as ungrateful. And just because I'm grateful for getting what we asked for, that doesn't mean I have to sheepishly go along with everything these companies do. And neither should you. You guys better stay hydrated this summer. Imagine this scenario. Rehydrated is out, all the fans are happy, and then once they play through it and the novelty wears off, they don't like it and then go back to the original game. It could happen, but I don't want it to. I want this game to be good. The game's success has a significant impact on what SpongeBob games we may receive in the future, and it's why we as a community have to speak up and not just be blinded by nostalgia. With that being said, THQ Nordic is still by far the best Nickelodeon publisher we've seen since the original THQ. In fact, they might even be better. I'm happy to see these goofy little captions when they post trailers, and it's great to see them replying to their fans on Twitter. I can't believe they watched one of the Rehydrated relief streams. I love their dedication to fans. Not a lot of publishers communicate well with their customers. Hell, they even responded to a Twitter account begging for a Barnyard remake. You guys know if this was Activision, they just fucking ignore it. They're the first publisher to talk to us, and that's not something we should take for granted. This shows that they're not going into this expecting SpongeBob to just sell off its name alone. It's clear that without THQ Nordic and the support from all of us, we wouldn't be getting this game. We're lucky that THQ Nordic seem to be fans of the series and that they also have good business practices. But we still can't let THQ Nordic sell us a dream and then just be happy with whatever they give us regardless of its quality. We deserve the best we can get, and so do today's kids. So how do you guys feel about Rehydrated? Feel free to express your thoughts in the comment section below. I'd like to thank you all so much for watching and have a very shiny day.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Hey Fred, are you going to review Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated?